introduce our next segment, Daring to Exceed, a conversation with former Treasurer of the United States, Rosie G. Rios, is our Vice President of Corporate Engagement and Programs at HACR, Alberto Ortega.
Buenos dias. Good morning. How did you find Deb Elam's talk? Great? It's great. I have some takeaways to share with you. But one particular story that Deb used actually resonated with me as I was sitting to your left or right, depending on where you're situated in the room. I don't leave my identity at home. Those of you who know me, know where I'm going to go with this. Yo no dejo mi identidad en la casa. Alberto Ortega, Vice President of Corporate Relations and Programs with HACR. Also, an alum of the HACR Young Hispanic Corporate Achievers Program Leadership Experience. And I would be remiss if I didn't do a little shout out to my fellow colegas of YCA of years past. Mariana from Liberty Mutual. Magali Munoz Mejorado, also from Liberty Mutual. And if I miss any other YCAers, Sochi, Wells Fargo. Now, Rosette, good to see you, right? Others, great experience. So, a couple of takeaways. Apart from that, I used to do this back when I worked in corporate at Sodexo. So, folks in Sodexo actually call me Alberto from Chicago. It was on every conference call, I would say I'm Alberto from Chicago. So, it kind of stuck, right? We got to evolve. That's, years past. So, a couple of takeaways that resonated very much with me from Deb center on being visionary. Right? You got to be able to see opportunities whereas others see challenges. From Chicago, you look around the corners, but you also watch your back. Another topic, right, centers on the attribute of confidence. If you watch your back, you better watch other people's back. And Sid, I know you love this. What can we do for you? And the second part you got from me, how can I get your back? When you can trust, right, engender trust in others, people will follow you. People will ride and die for you, so to speak. The last one, passionate. You gotta have passion to do this work. No puede ser aburrido. ¿Somos aburridos, aburridas o no? Yeah, no soy yo. Con ganas. Lastly, communicate. We have to be effective communicators. So on that note, I want you to amplify your communication or communicate your amplification, right, by using social media as a tool to tell the story of you being here at the executive programs that HACR is putting on for you, in addition to our Young Hispanic Corporate Achievers Program taking place just 2 ballrooms next to us. Please use the HACR hashtag, hashtag HACR EP22, as well as HACR YCA. On that note, I'd like to introduce to you our President and CEO of HACR, Sid Wilson, to introduce the next speaker in our lineup. Thank you.
Thank you. Can everybody hear me okay? All right. I am so excited about this session where I will be doing a fireside chat with one of the Latinas that I admire the most. She has been such an incredible, game-changing leader. Not just a U.S. leader, but a global leader. She is the 43rd Treasurer of the United States. She has her signature on all of your currencies, even 6 years after she completed her term as Treasurer of the United States. She actually set the Guinness Book of World Record for the person with the most currency with her signature ever in world global history. Not even Queen Elizabeth could say that. But most importantly, she is a proud, orgullosa Latina. And knowing that every single day that the US economy is moving and exchanging, it is done with Latina on the signature. But it's not just what she did while she was treasurer, it's what she's been doing as well after her term as treasurer, advancing the cause for women, being that voice for women, and particularly women of color. The initiatives of all the things that she did, that's why we call this above and beyond with the 43rd Treasurer of the United States. Please welcome our guest today, the Honorable Rosie Rios. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sid. Props.
All right. Well, Madam Treasurer Emeritus, is that what's the title? Like
Rosie.
Rosie.
It's Rosie.
Rosie. Thank you, Rosie. Rosie, can we talk about the early years before you became treasurer? I've heard you over the years talk about your family. You have many siblings, and you had a mother that was deeply committed to supporting everyone going to college. And tell me how that helped to prepare you to for what would become a historic appointment as Treasurer of the United States.
Well, first of all, thank you, Sid, for having me. I'm always thrilled to come back. I think I saw some familiar faces when I ran through here, so happy to reconnect. I think what HACR does is for me, I have two big priorities in my life. It's the physical representation of historical American women and women in positions of money and power, and especially women of color for me is the flag that I keep wearing and I can proudly wear. So it really does go back to my mom. You mentioned my mom, just still the love of my life. I will always call her the love of my life. But I'm one of 9 kids, raised as a single parent in Hayward, California. My parents came from Mexico in 1958 because my dad was a seasonal worker at the Hunt's Cannery in Hayward, California. And so they decided to plant their seeds in that year. And my mom, with more courage than I'll ever have, left my father, who was very abusive, and basically raised all 9 of us when my youngest sister was born and my oldest brother was 11, if you can imagine, 9 kids in 11 years. But the one thing that we did have was our village, our church. My mom had very strong Catholic values, and that really resonated, obviously, in our family, and it really was, in my opinion, what saved us. So we all went to Catholic school for 12 years. And there was never a doubt in my mind, certainly growing up, that was what was going to enable me to pursue my dreams. And so yes, she sent all 9 of us off to college. This is how arrogant I was as a high school junior. That confidence that she gave us in being, having that foundation, not just the foundation of values, but the foundation of education and the values of a strong family. And I'll never forget. Many of you may know or remember Lisa Quiros, who was one of my mentors. In fact, at the time, I'm going way back here. It was 1981. That's how old I am. 1981, and Lisa Quiros had just graduated from Harvard, and she was working full-time in the admissions office at Harvard. And me growing up in what is now Silicon Valley, the way they scouted back then was they looked at PSAT scores. And so she called me my junior year in high school, called me at my home. She introduced herself. My name is Lisa Quiros. I'm Harvard's admissions officer. Have you considered applying to Harvard? True story. She loves the story. I told her immediately, no thanks, I'm going to Stanford. Literally, that was my response. Stanford was like Mecca across the bridge from where I live. So that's where you went if you're going to be someone. What's Harvard? Where is that? What? Where is that? So what she said to me was, look, you have nothing to lose in applying. I'll waive the admission fee, which I think was $50 back then. $50, that's a lot. So she said, you have nothing to lose. I'll waive the admissions fee. Why don't you just try it, see what happens. And if you get in, great. We'll talk then. So I did. And that's where I went. And we lost Lisa a few years ago. But she remains still to this day. I keep saying I would be nowhere, maybe somewhere. I wouldn't be where I am today, in my opinion, without her. So those seeds are important.
No, that's beautiful. And I know she's looking down from above, because we both of us knew Lisa Quiros she was just an amazing leader. Yep. But it's so incredible what influence she had on you.
Absolutely.
So Then the opportunity happens. You got the call from President Obama saying, I want you to be the 43rd Treasurer of the United States. And you became the treasurer, but you made a decision to take that role way above any treasurer in the US history. I mean, even Alexander Hamilton couldn't say he did what you did. So, I mean, talk to us about that decision to just say, I want to go above and beyond just the traditional role of being a United States treasurer.
Yeah, and that was really important to me. It's, I love social experiments. I love them. So what actually happened is, you may all know who Aida Alvarez is, another mentor of mine. Aida and I became friends, and at the time in 2008, so we all remember the height of the financial crisis, at the time, I was managing director of investments for a $22 billion firm based in San Francisco. And great life, fabulous life. My daughter was 8, my son was 12. I had a wonderful career at that point. And Aida called me. This was October of 2008, so the sky was falling. Lehman had already collapsed. And she said that one of her colleagues from the Clinton administration was starting up what would be the Treasury transition team should Obama win in November of 2008. This would be the finance professional team that would work with Secretary Paulson and President Bush, so that when Obama takes office in January of 2009, that legislation that Congress had just passed on its second attempt, the Emergency Economic Stabilization Act, would be in full swing by the time Obama took office in January of 2009. So she said, would you be interested? And at that time, literally, I just closed on a $300 million capital raise. I was about to take, I'm not kidding, a 14-week vacation, because I hadn't taken vacation in how long. And I thought to myself, this would be fun. Sure, I'll take that vacation. And, and the truth is, when you get a call like that, you can't really say no. You can't say no. And again, I would be one of 24 finance professionals during one of the most consequential times of our economic history. How do you say no to that? So I did, and I did. So I went, and it was during that period of November of 2008 through February of 2009 when, literally the economic house was on fire. And I loved every minute, every minute. And I had no intention, ever, in my life of ever thinking I would work for the federal government. Not in a million years. But it was, towards the end of that time where of the 24 or so who were on this transition team, about half a dozen were recommended for a permanent appointment. I was one of those. And so they asked me, what would you consider? And I'm thinking to myself, gosh, I'd already had this concept in my head in December of 2008 about our currency. That's another long story. I'll get to that one later. But I decided on Treasury of the United States for many, many reasons. One was, you may or may not know, there has been this interesting tradition that it has been, I think I'm the 6th Latina, at the time, and many of them from California. And I'm going to say this with all due respect, that wasn't good enough. It wasn't good enough to say, because I'm a Latina, I'm going to take this position and just be happy to be there with my name on the money. That was not good enough. And, coming from a career in finance, I actually wanted to redeem this position. So the position had been ceremonial. The position didn't really have a lot of responsibility. And so I created my portfolio and submitted a proposal to be approved that should I take this position, this is what I'm going to do. So I asked that the position include oversight over the Bureau of Engraving and Printing and the U.S. Mint, so our currency and coin production is about 4,000 employees, $5 billion budget. I asked to be the first ever senior advisor to the Secretary of the Treasury, specifically on community development, so job creation, access to capital, small business lending. And the third, and for me, one of the most important, was I wanted to be the chair of the Advanced Counterfeit Deterrence Steering Committee. As the chair of this committee, which is the only formal collaborative that includes the Federal Reserve, Secret Service, and Treasury, as the chair, I would be the only person in the world who can make a recommendation to the Secretary on the future of our currency design. That was my overt, covert mission, is I wanted to change our nation's currency. And I knew if I had that responsibility and had direct access to the Secretary and was part of the senior team who met with him regularly every day, I think I'm the only one of the few that's ever done that. Yeah. Might be the only one, a treasurer, who's ever done that. So again, access is key. Having a substantive portfolio with a financial foundation was key. And yes, it is a cool title. Yes, by the way, my name is on 1.8 trillion out of the little over 2 trillion in circulation. So that is kind of the novelty part, but this wasn't about a novelty. I didn't want to be a novelty. I still don't want to be a novelty, by the way. I want to be the norm. So again, I wanted to redeem the position and hopefully blaze the trail to make that position, which has historically been a Latina, a substantive position in a decision-making capacity that had access to the senior leadership. So I was nominated by the president in May of 2009, confirmed by the Senate in July of 2009, one of the quickest vets they've ever had, hence my boring life. And never looked back. I never in a million years thought I'd be there as long as I did, but I was there for the full 2 terms, and then most recently as part of President Biden's Treasury transition team, the only person in the world who's done that. So both Treasury transition teams, and then both turned to the Obama administration. So I've seen a lot of skeletons. Somehow I'm asked back, and I've enjoyed every minute.
You were talking about before that you had no idea that you would go down this path, and can you talk about how you identify when those defining moments happen? Because this was clearly a defining moment where you're like, okay, I thought I was going to stay in the private sector, but then this moment happened, and sometimes it just the opportunity presents itself, and how do you take that moment to say, okay, I'm going to take this moment and just go, above and beyond. And I love how you just said, before I take that position, this is what I want to have as an outcome.
Yeah, I wish we did that a lot more. I feel like we as a community, we settle. We're supposed to be humble. We're supposed to be happy to be here and don't make any waves. I mean, I am proud to say I am a disruptor, but I'm a constructive disruptor. I don't go in there just to, break glasses and say I was here. When that light bulb hit me during the transition team about this currency design, you talk about, how did this come? I've had probably 3 or 4 moments like that where I call kind of the intersection of my head and my heart. You have to find kind of this purpose, but you have to be also practical. You can't just fly by the seat of your pants and think that things are going to work out. That's not the way life works. You have to be strategic. You have to be deliberate. You have to be thoughtful. You have to do your homework. So a lot of things that I do, there's a very specific process that I go through to make those decisions. And so I would say, my career has basically been, I started out as a commercial property underwriter for general reinsurance, so a very analytical, quantitative start. And I think for anyone who's an analyst or any type of, financial management, anything that kind of is more of a systematic process, that's the way I was trained. And so for me, it's existing conditions, it's case study, it's precedent, it's analysis, it's recommendation, it's implementation. That's a very, very, very specific process. And I use that for everything that I do, everything. Because if you don't cover your basis, how are you going to get to the yes, right? The only way you get to the yes is by anticipating all the no's. So that career path that I had, which has basically been in 3 areas, I guess I would put it in 3 buckets, which is kind of real estate, investment management, and economic development. So, because I did 10 years in local government as director of economic development and or redevelopment for many cities, and then 10 years in commercial real estate, and I would say, getting old now, the investment management side, on the capital side. So I would say those 3 buckets, I never in a million years thought that they would be so relevant to the financial crisis, right? So real estate, investment management, and economic development, oh my gosh, housing, access to capital, jobs. Who would have thought that those were going to be the 3 areas that really came together for this, again, unprecedented economic recovery? Now, I didn't plan that, but I did follow my head and my heart. Where I was deliberate was, that other aha moment for me, which was probably one of the more personal ones, and that was when I was on the transition team. So stressful. We all remember, right, the crisis. I hope we do, because it's hard to forget, but we have short memories when it comes to crises. But, again, the sky was falling, the global sky was falling. And I don't remember much during that time other than I couldn't eat and I couldn't sleep. And we were getting these just piles of documents every day to review. Sometimes as teams, sometimes as individuals. Sometimes we'd have a week to turn something in. Sometimes we'd have an hour to turn in a recommendation on everything you've heard of and haven't heard of during the crisis. And so I would take my breaks in the Treasury's Historical Resource Center. The Historical Resource Center, people don't realize this, is when Treasury, they didn't just produce currency that actually produced all the financial products of the federal government. I mean, think about it. When George Washington became president in 1789, one of the first things he did, he established the Treasury Department and put Secretary Alexander Hamilton in place. So Treasury was kind of the, you know, the center of the universe. Everything came from that. GSA came from that. ATF came from that. I mean, all these, you know, weights and measures all came from Treasury. So in the Resource Center, they had all the kind of historical documents of all the things they've ever produced. So it was everything from savings bonds to military payment certificates to postage stamps, food stamps, if you can believe that. This is kind of weird to go back and see food stamps, because that's what we lived on. But all of that was preserved and not open to the public. So I was looking at things that, you know, a lot of like living humans hadn't seen, because I'm pouring through a lot of that. I had access. Of course I was going to get in there. And it was when I was going through that, kind of this high stress period, on my break, looking through the stuff over and over and over again, trying to find the buried treasure. And it was there, you know, when you're kind of in another altered state, if you will, that, you know, I saw a pattern. I literally saw a pattern. Every single image that I came across of a woman on all these products was not a real woman. It was allegorical, like Lady Liberty, sometimes clothed and sometimes not clothed. But every image that I came across of a man was a real man, a founding father, a president, a cabinet member. And I'm thinking, well, this is weird. Yeah. This is strange. And so I did a little bit of homework, and I realized that at that time, there were almost 30 countries that had women on their modern-day currency. I did a little bit more research, and I realized, oh my God, we as a country have never had the portrait of a woman on a Federal Reserve notes. And I thought that was weird. We're the leader of the free world. How could that be, right? If you look at how currency is used around the world, it's usually a very important person on the front and a very symbolic edifice or milestone on the back. If this is how you institutionalize your history, how could you be missing half the population? So again, that was my big aha moment for me. That was December of 2008. And that's where I made the deliberate decision to relocate my kids, you know, from the only bed that they've known, the only house and school that they've ever gone to this foreign land from California to DC, because I felt like I needed to make a difference. And I'm glad believe me, I'm glad I did. But remember, you know, I was very methodical. It was a very secret project. I didn't want it to get out in the press. I didn't want it to become political, and I didn't want it to get out there until I had the chance to present it to Secretary Geithner. So I teed it up. Literally, it took me 4 years to tee up that project, because I wanted to follow the path of how currency is normally designed, which is by security threat. You don't just pull a denomination out of the hat and say, I'm putting my mom on the $100 bill because that's what I say. No. It's, again, which denomination has the most security threat, and then you go through a process, and it has, and every generation of currency has a theme. So, and I recommended the theme for this next generation of currency. It's a long story, but to make a long story short, the theme that I recommended for this next generation of currency is democracy. And that, who'd have thought it'd be so relevant? But it's still the theme today. And it was from that theme that it dawned on me that when we were going to unveil the first set of currency designs would be in the year 2020. Oh my goodness, 2020, for those who don't know this, and probably most of the country and the world still don't know this, 2020 was the 100th anniversary of the 90th Amendment granting women the right to vote. So what better way to reflect democracy than giving half your population the ability to participate in the governance process? That's how this became about a woman. It wasn't about a woman for the sake of a woman. It was this theme of democracy, kind of, again, tying into the normal process for this very technical security evolution. And then, again, tying in the conceptual piece of this, of the theme and kind of the design. And the purpose, the whole reason why I even have these design processes is for security, right? So you probably have seen the $100 bill. This came out in 2013. So this blue security ribbon going down the middle, that took 14 years to develop. It's 500,000 microlenses, much more sophisticated than a hologram. So again, you don't just pull a rabbit out of a hat and say, this is what I want. It's how you present something in a very deliberate and strategic way where you take the nose off the table. And I got to tell you, when I made that presentation to Secretary Geithner in October of 2012, probably one of the most happiest, probably really the happiest day of my life, when I made the full presentation after this 4 years of working with a very small, close team. And his response was, this is cool, we should do this. I mean, it doesn't get any better than that. Yeah. Now, the fact that it took us 4 years after that to make the announcement, you do the math. It's a long story. I'll probably have to take that one to my grave. But it was worth it. Believe me when I say it was worth it.
Well, I mean, that was, you took it further than any other treasurer ever in history.
Any other person.
Any other person in history. I keep calling it treasurer, I know, because.
Because the secretary could have done that. We've had, we've had 77 secretaries.
Wow.
Any one of them could have done the same thing. Any president could have suggested the same thing. Any human being could have done the same thing.
Yeah. And I think that what you did there was just so incredibly historic, and it was, and when the announcement happened that about finally identifying the fact that we have to have women on our U.S. currency, I think was, for most of us, it's like, of course. But the fact that it took so long is something that is a...
The fact that it's still taking
they're still taking this long.
So I was just in Saudi Arabia in March, and it's kind of hard to say this, but that's still the one thing that we share with Saudi Arabia. That's the two developed countries that still don't have women on their modern day currency. So there you go.
Wow.
There it is. It's not over.
Well, there you know. There you
not over. Not over.
So one of the things that I, in just following your accomplished career, is that wherever you went, you always brought your authentic Latina self with you, and you never try to like either use the word like assimilate sometimes and all else like this. I mean, you made everyone acculturate to you. Wherever you go. I mean, can you talk to us about how in all these meetings and all, everything that you've done professionally, how you bring your Latina self with you everywhere?
It's hard.
Yeah.
It's really hard. I mean, we're still the outlier. Still, right? We're still the, here we are. We're going to be 20% of the population in the next few years, right? Is that what it is? It's just kind of crazy to think that we're still the minority. I mean, certainly we're here in California, right? Or we're not the minority. Or I guess we still are, but again, it's sad. It's just sad. I'm a numbers person, so the numbers don't lie. If you just look at it from a consumer, buying power perspective, if you look at it from a voter perspective, if you look at it from what all our grandkids are likely going to look like, right? You can't escape that. And why should you? Why should you escape that? Right. That's kind of the point. So I would say, again, because my cultural roots, obviously were very, very strong growing up. I was obsessed with menudo in high school, and I didn't care who knew that. I didn't care who knew it. I didn't care. But when I went to Harvard, that was an eye-opener for me. That was an eye-opener. So that was 1983 when I graduated from high school. And believe me when I say, no one looked like me. I mean, no one. So that was a little weird. And again, that was my first time really back to that foreign land. That was Cambridge, Massachusetts. That was an eye-opener for me, but I think growing up in a world of chaos, again, 9 kids by a single parent, you adapt, you survive. That kind of crisis mode kicks in, and you think about, how do you solve this? What do you do with it? I am not going to be anyone's victim. I refuse to be anyone's victim. So, and I also knew I was smarter than everyone. So, again, that strange arrogance kind of kicked in here and there. Helped me, I think.
Love that.
But I decided, I mean, why hide it? I threw it all in. I became the director of the Ballet Folklorico at Harvard. In fact, I think at that time, the only college-based Mexican dancing group in the East Coast. Boy, did we stick out. But for me, it was sad that I couldn't share that with the rest of the world because I loved it so much. So it took me a couple years, but for anyone, I don't know if anyone here go to Harvard? Raise your hand if you went to Harvard. Yep. Anyone remember, hey, a couple, all right. Anyone remember cultural rhythms? Cultural rhythms? All right, well, it still goes on. Cultural rhythms, I started my junior year at Harvard, where it wasn't about race, it wasn't about ethnicity, it was how one wanted to express themselves and share with the rest of the community. I define culture as the threads of the fabric of the community. However you want to define culture, define it however you want to. So I started that as a way to kind of, find common ground and share. For me, it was, how do I get the Ballet Folklorico to have other people exposed to it? So it became my junior year, so 1986 is when we first launched it. It took me a long time to get that up and running. Another great mentor of mine, Dr. Alan Counter at the Harvard Foundation, who sponsored me, has since passed away, but just another great mentor of mine. And Cultural Rhythms was a day of celebration, however you wanted to celebrate yourself. And so for us, it was the Baile Folklorico, but back then, Harvard's idea of culture was like, a cappella, nothing wrong with that. The gin and tonics and, the great. We had to pull in, like I remember we found one Greek Orthodox church around the corner that we pulled in their Greek folk dancing group. And I mean, again, and how we wanted to find culture was very limited there. But it grew, and again, it still goes on today. And I gotta tell you, there have been moments where, again, it's so difficult to make change. And then there's one or two things along the way that make you realize, oh my God, it was so worth it. So I remember, I'll never forget, when I was invited back, I think it was for Cultural Rhythms' 25th anniversary. I can't remember. I was invited back every year, but the 25th was actually, Eva Longoria joined us. It was fun. We had a celebrity host every year. So anyway, we're at the welcoming lunch. And the entertainment for the lunch was Harvard's mariachi band. They actually have a mariachi band now, if you can believe it. I know, it's so bizarre. So they're playing for us at lunch. I'm thinking, wow, I never thought I'd see this in a million years. But it was great. Both violinists were Asian. And I thought, well, this is, I'm curious. Yeah. You've piqued my interest. I'm curious. So afterward, and they were great, by the way. The group was fabulous. So I went to go meet them afterwards. I'm talking to them. I went up to the two violinists. I'm like, look, just curious. This is obviously a Mexican group, this music. What inspired you to join this group? So one said, this is my roommate over here. He forced me to do it, but I'm glad I did, right? That was one answer. Glad I did, though. The other answer was interesting. The other answer was, I've been playing classical music my entire life, and I hate it. I love the violin, but I hate classical music. The second I heard this music, I knew I wanted to do something different. And it tests my skill sets, he says. It gets me out of my comfort zone. It allows me still to play the violin in a way that I never knew I could play it. So again, that was his way of celebrating his culture, the culture of playing the violin. Right? So again, for me, and there was another year where there was a group called THUD, the Harvard Undergraduate Drummers. This was a long time ago. And they, you probably seen from Pitch Perfect, the movie where they play music with cups, but they were like an orchestra. They were crazy good. Yeah. So I went up to them afterwards. I'm like, okay, I gotta know, like, what the hell is this? Like, how did you come up with this band? And they said, all of them, same thing, kind of. We were percussionists. I played the drums. I played fill in the blank. This is a percussion instrument. We knew that when we came here, we went to Cultural Rhythms, what are we going to do? What are we going to do? And we came up with this. Right? It had nothing to do with race, had nothing to do with ethnicity. It was, and again, how they want to express themselves. And I remember the first, maybe it was 10 years into Cultural Rhythms when I came back. And I remember going into the food hall where all these organizations sell whatever they want to sell, and that's how they raise money for the year, which is really great. So everyone supports each other. But I remember walking in, and one year there was, the world's, probably the size of that table, the world's largest rainbow cake. And I'm like, finally, we get it. We get it. Now we, as a Harvard community, understands what culture is. It's not what I look like. It's not how you want to define me. It's how I want to define me. And I'm going to end that particular story with one last story, which is my son. His name is Joey, my pride in Joey. So I'll never forget reading Joey's college essay when he applied to Harvard. He called it A Tale of Two Grandmas. He's now 26. So he starts out by saying in this essay, I am Joey. And he goes on about his grandmother from Guadalajara, Jalisco, Mexico, and his grandmother from Hokkaido, Japan, how they both raised him with common values of family, food, faith, and unconditional love. And he ended the essay by saying, I am Joey. He's not one or the other. He's all of it. He's the sum of his experiences raised by his village. And it's not what you see, even though he looks 100% Asian, he's Joey. He's not one or the other. So, that generation, he's 26, my daughter's 21, that generation of kind of millennials / post-millennials, that is the way they see themselves. Optionality is everything to them. Fluidity is everything to them. Whether it's gender, whether it's orientation, whether it's race, whether it's religion, whether it's partisanship. It's complete optionality and fluidity, not how you want to define them or what box you want to check. It's what box they want to check or not check, right? So that, again, that's an important lesson. But again, it was really reading Joey's essay that really kind of put it all into perspective for me.
When
he graduated in 2019 from Harvard. Yeah. All right.
Yes. Well, absolutely, yes. No. Well, if you think that Harvard story gives an applause, I want you to talk about the one that I think is going to give everyone like a huge applause. Is that, Harvard's been around since what, 16-something?
1636.
1636. I mean, and if anyone that's ever gone to Harvard, whether you attended it or visited it, you see all these portraits all over Harvard of all these distinguished people that have graduated from Harvard over the years. They've never, ever, 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 ever had a Latina as part of their portrait until now. And you are the first Latina ever to have a permanent portrait. So what was, share with us that experience, because given how close you've been and all the things that you did while you at Harvard, and again, it's above and beyond what you did at Treasurer, what you did at Harvard, and now you have a portrait.
Yeah,
Forever and ever and ever, for hundreds of years to come.
It was surreal. It was, and we, and I'm going to kind of blanket us for a second, my own stereotype. Again, we feel like sometimes as a community we're so undeserving. We don't deserve this. So even when, I'll tell you, I was with my mom when I got the call. I was actually eating lunch in the Treasury dining room when I got the call from Harvard saying, you have been officially nominated as part of the portraiture committee to have a portrait commissioned in your honor. And I thought it was like a joke. I'm like, who is this? Who is it? And obviously they introduced themselves, and they said, Dr. Alan Counter, my mentor from the Harvard Foundation, is the one who recommended you. You still have to go through a process, but you should know that you're now officially nominated, and we'll keep you posted. Again, my mom was with me. Like, how fabulous was that? The Secretary of the Treasury just walked into the dining room next to me. He's like, what? What are you doing? What are you talking about? So I had to tell him, and it was, it was just such a nice moment that my mom got a chance to hear it when it first happened. And then, obviously it was approved. And I still, even at the time when the portrait artist came to the Treasury building in my office to start doing initial sketching, and he wanted to be in my office, which is a fabulous office. So he thought that would be a good background. And it was, when he came into my office, I think it was probably 2014 or 2015. It takes time, obviously, to do these things. And I was actually kind of sad because at that time, I wasn't quite sure that the currency design was ever going to be announced. It was in jeopardy. Too many years it was in jeopardy. And I remember when he asked me what kind of look that I wanted on my face, and he kept asking me to smile. He's like, you look so sad. That can't be your portrait. You have to have a better image. But it's funny, when I see the portrait now, I still look sad. I do. My mom can't stand it. She can't stand it because she thinks I look like, she's like, that's not you. You're happy all the time. You just look like, the sky is falling there. And I said, well, that was an interesting time when the portrait was done. But, I told her, look, it's not a glamour shot. When you look at portraits, most people are, serious. What am I going to do, So, no, it's a serious look. It is a serious look. So the best part about the portrait, though, so many reasons, but one is it's in Winthrop House, which is the house that I lived in my sophomore, junior, and senior year. It's just a dorm, 250 students of sophomore, juniors, and seniors. So it's in the dining room, it's in the common room. But we had the initial unveiling when it was first completed, and then Winthrop House went through a renovation, so they had to store it while it was being renovated. So they had the official unveiling. Ready for this? The official unveiling actually happened in 2019, the day after my son graduated. So it was perfect because I felt so bad at first because I'm thinking, oh my God, it's his day. Like, it's his commencement day. I don't want to take away from that. And he, what his response was? His response was, Mom, I can't tell you how honored I am that I get to share this experience with you. Like, I get to be here. Because it was all his friends. It was all my family that flew out for the portrait unveiling and the commencement. So, coming out from California is kind of a twofer. But the fact that he was, like, so proud that his friends, all his friends who were graduating with him, could also participate in this. So it is kind of weird, like, it's kind of a strange story, but like Stella McCartney, the fashion designer, she went to take a tour of Harvard, and she's a good friend of mine, so she took a picture with her at the portrait. I'm like, oh my God, Stella McCartney's talking about my portrait. Like, how exciting was that, right?
Yeah.
So it is weird when I do get these random texts or random photos from people saying, I saw your portrait today, isn't that great? You know, it's bizarre. And in a strange, weird way, I also feel like I didn't deserve it yet. Like, not yet, but I will. I swear. I'm still working on it. There's still so many things I want to do. It's like one of the, I mean, I hate to say it this way, it's like when Obama won the Nobel Prize before he even took office. Not that he didn't deserve it, I'm just saying it's like that. It's like, okay, this is the seed that we're going to plant, and you got to earn it now. That's what it feels like. It feels like I haven't gotten, even though I have, and I know I have, and I know there's a lot of blood, sweat, and tears along the way that got me to that point, but I feel like there's still so much to do.
Yeah, so with that, you know, before we open for questions, what is next for Rosie Rios? I mean, you serve on corporate boards now, and you know you're keeping busy, you know. But what's next? What's that? And what do you think will be your
Volume
your
one?
Yes.
I would say, God, too many things. So you know, so my awakening, my new world, my personal passion of, you know, still the physical recognition of historical American women. So one thing you might have seen, actually brought one with me, is you might have seen. It took me 5 years to do this. So strangely enough, to change currency design by law, the paper currency, it's one person. It's the Secretary of the Treasury. It's not Congress. It's not the President. By US law. To change the design of a coin is an act of Congress. I'm not kidding. So I had made this proposal back in 2016 before I left to have this legislation to follow the 50-state quarter program, to have women represented on our quarter starting in 2020, the end of 2020, which is when that state quarter program was finishing. Didn't get anywhere until last year. So December 2020, my legislation passed to put women on our quarters. So this last January, you might have seen, the Maya Angelou quarter came out, 5 quarters per year. So it's, by the way, it's the first time in US history that we have an African American on our coin or currency. So, you know, welcome to the 30s, right? So we'll have 5 more. Nina Otero-Warren will come out in September, an activist from New Mexico. So we've already had Sally Ride in March, Wilma Mankiller this month, Nina Otero-Warren in September, and then Anna Mae Wong in November, I think. So we'll have 5 per year. But, you know, again, when am I going to stop? When I'm not talking about this anymore, when I don't have to talk about it anymore, right? So the fact that we're still a novelty, the fact that I still have to say, oh my God, this is the first time we've ever had an African American on our coin and currency. I mean, that doesn't make me proud. That makes me sad. It makes me sad to think, you know, here we are, you know, I feel like we're decades behind the rest of the world. Like, it's no big deal anywhere else in the world, but here. Why is that? Because that translates into why you're all here today, right? I do think there's a correlation between visibility and value. I do think there's a correlation between honoring 51% of your population, and when you get to people of color, when it comes to corporate boards or C-suite, we're not even a rounding error, right? I mean, Latinos are the 1%. The 1% we don't want to be, which is the 1% of corporate boards, right? In the S&P 500, which is the saddest stat. Hardly a rounding error.
Yeah.
So, you know, in the C-suite, we've had one CEO ever, Latina, who, you know, unfortunately kind of went down in flames. So it's, you know, that's not good enough.
Right.
It's not good enough. So when will I stop? When we don't have to talk about this anymore? When it's the norm?
Well, I absolutely. So.
By the way, I just became the CEO. I don't know if so I am now global co-CEO of Wealth Connect, which is a technology platform for the investment management community. Very excited. Obviously, it's a pre-IPO, so we're not quite the Fortune 500 yet, but, you know, stay tuned.
Stay tuned.
We'll get there. We'll get there.
So again, Rosie, this has just been such an incredible honor and privilege, and you know, just know how admired you are by the millions of not only Latinos around the country, but millions of Americans and women and in the U.S. and around the world that have seen, you know, just you know, what you've done to really you know, advance our communities. So we're just so thankful, and knowing how busy you are, we're so thankful for taking time to join us today. So can everyone give another big HACR applause to the 43rd Treasurer of the United States, Rosie Rios. Thank you so much. We appreciate that.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Yeah, give her a...
Thank you.
That's right. Our 43rd Treasurer of the United States.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much.